Alright guys, welcome back to All Cars. It is time for another VinFast update. I got a lot of things to talk about here because VinFast has literally made their job as hard as possible, and they've made that mountain hard to climb. They're facing headwinds, and they're almost all of their own doing, and I think some of it is a cultural thing. So welcome back, and I have talked multiple times on this channel about VinFast. I am still cautiously bullish on the company. If you need a refresher or you haven't seen some of my other videos, here it is. VinFast is a conglomerate out in Vietnam. They started building cars only a few years ago, I think about 5 now, and decided to start designing their own electric car and built a brand new factory, and they are launching here in the United States and in Europe. They've also, after they announced this, they're going to start building a factory here in North Carolina, and they promised to bring cars here at the end of 2022 and started taking reservations. And they've actually hit all of those. In fact, they're lining up for an IPO this year. But the news has turned somewhat negative against them, and like I said, I think this is all of their own creation. So me personally, I'm still a little bullish, I'm still a little cautious. We'll talk about it more at the end, but they have done an amazing job. I want to give them all the props in the world. They've done an amazing job launching, building press, building positive awareness of their company, launching their Facebook page, a great website that they update rather frequently as well, tons of positive news out there, building awareness of a brand new brand here in the States. They've opened stores and promised to bring those cars here by the end of 2022, and they did it. They've also done a great job getting journalists, influencers, and YouTubers to talk about it. I'm guilty of it right now, and this is where a company where several have pointed out how quickly and decisively they move. People who've actually gone and talked to the engineers and the manufacturing people like that, they talk about how it's not bogged down with the corporate culture of other car companies where it takes weeks to make a decision. When they test something, they see it's wrong, they just fix it within a few days typically. It moves incredibly fast. So I want to say up front, I'm super impressed with them, and I'm still cautiously optimistic. However, not everything is rosy, and I do think this is a series of missteps that unforced errors is what they are. And the first is, let's talk about those deliveries. Now, they promised when they started taking reservations that their plan was they were going to be shipping cars here to these states by the end of 2022. They've got this beautiful new factory over there in Vietnam, and they've been building the electric cars over there for a few months now, I believe. They finally sent a ship with 999 cars to America. Apparently 999 is a lucky number for them. But what they didn't do is tell anyone that the range was going to be dramatically different. When you look in the reservation and you see the range of what the VF8 is supposed to be, what they were sending here were relabeled city editions with only about 180, 190 miles of range. And they didn't really do a press release about it. They didn't really come out with it and be forward about it. They just kind of were like, oh, and we're shipping these. Now, they are giving reservation holders a chance to either wait for a different car or to take discounts for this car, but it still felt a little underhanded. And I think when you look at the size of the battery, either this car has a functional structural problem with the battery and the motors and the efficiency they run at, or far more likely, they flubbed the range test, like meeting the EPA standards. They messed something up. So I kind of think if they're shipping the right size battery and the technology is not critically flawed, I think this will be revised upwards either with new tests and or software updates. But it still felt a little underhanded and got a lot of press for it, not positive. Now, where I go with this from a cultural perspective is that VinFast kind of painted themselves into a corner with this. Like, the end of 2022 is coming, and they had two choices. Number one is they've got some cars that are not meeting the range that they told people it was going to get. They could either make the deliveries with the poor range and suffer bad press, or push the deliveries back, ship the cars later, meet what they said they were going to do, which meant more bad press for them, and they chose the former. I want to say, while I'm really disappointed in it, I'm really disappointed in the City Edition coming along, because it represents a horrific value in the EV space. The fact is I do want to give them just a little tiny bit of props for hitting the milestones that they said they were going to hit. They've been popping through them. Now, second, let's talk about these trips to Vietnam. Now, they have sent hundreds or thousands of influencers, of journalists, of YouTubers, of TikTokers, everybody else over to Vietnam, put them up for several days in luxury accommodations, luxury resorts, toured them around Vietnam, entertained them with shows and alcohol, all to get to a day where they had about 20 minutes to see an actual VF8 and drive it. Well, unfortunately, some revelations have come out from a couple of different sources now saying that VinFast was spending a lot of money, not just on these trips, but actually in offering people, let's say, a per diem of in the multi-$1,000s. It has been thrown around that it was about $10,000 per influencer to actually attend this trip. The optics on this are pretty negative, because it looks like they're buying positive press, because almost everything I saw from everybody who went to Vietnam with the limited amount of time, they talked about the accommodations, how great, how friendly people were, how controlled they felt, how followed they felt, and how wonderful the car actually was once you got behind the wheel. This, again, looks like an unforced error on their part, where they've kind of painted themselves in a corner. They bought positive press, and it's kind of had a little bit of blowback in, well, do we really trust what we've heard? I think this is minor. I think this is going to pass. Number one, because it hasn't really hit the mainstream press. This is really people like me who follow cars or follow VinFast specifically. It's kind of come up and kind of been like, and it's put a little bit of a taint on a few reviewers that I know went to Vietnam. Do you really trust what they say? But I think once the cars are hitting the roads and we get more and more real life reviews, not a controlled environment like that, I think that'll all just kind of wash out and the flaws will start coming out. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. Oh, and in full disclosure, I did have a brief conversation with VinFast myself about whether I'd be interested in going to Vietnam. I never received an actual offer from them to do anything for a flight, a date, or any reimbursement for it. Never made it that far. I'm just not big and important enough, I guess, to be considered. Third, while in the US, most reservation holders have not actually received their car, much of the initial hands-on press has been relatively poor. Early reviews are talking about the creaks, rattles, poor quality materials in some places, flat bench seats, and how it doesn't feel like it actually has the power VinFast is saying it's supposed to have. Specifically, the VF8 is what I'm talking about. Even worse is that when you look at some people who've bought in Vietnam, they are actually talking about breakdowns being left on the side of the road and spending days or longer in the service department being taken care of. Apparently VinFast is stepping up to take care of issues, and in one case I know of, and this was in Vietnam, giving that person a rental car, a car to borrow while theirs was in the shop. But it kind of gives this overall vibe that they rushed everything a little bit. You know, materials in a country that's just building out their infrastructure to supply automakers, you would expect some mistakes and some flubs along the way of not the best quality material, but you would kind of hope that the ability for the car to actually run would be sorted out, and certainly at what amounts to a premium price. Nobody's perfect. We're all expecting growing pains from a brand new company moving into a brand new market, but once again, this all just feels like they kind of rushed it out to hit a milestone that they actually set for themselves. And finally, that leads us into the price. Now, I think VinFast has really missed this big time and have once again painted themselves into a corner where a decision has to be made. I've talked for a long time and done videos about I don't think they're a great bargain. That, you know, you compare it to the Mach-E, you compare it to that Ioniq 5, and the VinFast just doesn't look like Well, forget a deal. It doesn't even look barely competitive in terms of price. And I get a lot of comments from people from Vietnam when I put these videos up, and they almost always say something like, yeah, but it's a luxury car. Well, maybe that's true, but if it's not price competitive with an Audi or Tesla, where's your argument? Well, the problem is with these new cars coming out and they're not exactly perfect. Well, if somebody's buying a luxury car, they want it to be perfect. Some models that out of spec actually drove, the driver assistance aids weren't actually turned on. So again, you get this overall feeling of it being kind of rushed. I do believe that this is a historic moment. And the question is this a historic moment like Yugo being introduced here and flaming out, or like the next Hyundai being launched? And I still kind of believe it's the next Hyundai. I don't think there's anything here that they can't necessarily fix, but they backed themselves into that corner. They've got a big investment going on here in North Carolina at a factory, and that's good. They are planning on an IPO. That's good. They are hitting their milestones. They're doing what they said they were going to do, and they have the backing of a huge conglomerate. This is not some people bootstrapping themselves along. So they've got the resources to make this right over a slightly longer term, say a few years. And so there will be these growing pains. So if we make a huge assumption that the range issue is literally software or testing procedures, then everything else is pretty fixable as they update the model a little bit. But the pricing is going to be their downfall, potentially, because right now they're already not fairly priced. And while I like to, and I've heard others say, it's like the Hyundai launch in America, Hyundai launched by being competitive in price relative to the Japanese cars and certainly the American cars. When the Japanese cars came here in the 60s and the 70s, they were much cheaper, smaller, and more efficient than the American cars. And that's not the path VinFast is taking here. They're jumping in at the luxury end at that, well, $55,000 range and up. They're going to be bringing in a couple more cars, the VF6 and the VF7, which will be a little bit more affordable. But competition is growing, and they've placed themselves at the upper end. So you've got a brand that has no name recognition. They're not testing that well, and I think we're going to find out a lot more in the coming months as these hit actual buyers who can let people drive them for an extended period of time. But they're making the road as hard as possible. And the biggest thing is the recent price cut for Tesla. This just happened last week. I did a video on it, but because we've got these new EV tax credits coming out, Tesla had to adjust the prices of their fleet to keep demand up, and specifically the Model Y, which competes pretty close with the VF8. They had to lower its price down to about $53,000, let's say, in one of their most popular configurations. That undercuts VinFast. So why? I think they painted themselves into a corner here where, I know I keep saying that phrase, but where there's no easy way out. They either have to build their name as a luxury brand to go compete with Audi and Mercedes and BMW head to head, or they've got to find a way to discount their prices so it's more in line with the mainstream offerings that are out there. Because right now, I see some of the GMs that are going to be coming out on that Ultium platform and some of what Hyundai and Kia are doing as absolutely eating their lunch before they ever get started. There's no easy answers here, but I'm still not betting against them. I like the style, I like the story, I like that they're investing in a factory and they're planning on expanding. They've got these big dreams and they've got the backing to make it happen. And the majority of what I'm seeing can be fixed as they roll out and as they launch. But boy, some of their decisions have really kind of made their road as hard and as uphill as possible. And of course, if you are a reservation holder and you've received your VinFast and you are anywhere near North Carolina, I'd love to talk to you because I would love to spend some time in one of these and do a review and get some miles behind the wheel, because I'm still kind of bullish, but I'm a lot more cautious than I used to be. Thanks for watching, guys.